7 O'Clock Stories by Robert Gordon Anderson. 16th Night SLOSHIN. Of course, Marmaduke grew well again, and back from Uncle Roger's came Jehoshaphat and Hezekiah. They came back in the old creaking buckboard with Methuselah, the old white horse, and the toyman. No sooner had they jumped to the ground than Marmaduke asked very proudly, "Where do you think I've been?" "You've been sick." Marmaduke shook his head. "That's not what I mean," he said. "I've been to see the old man in the moon." "Now you're telling stories," jeered Jehoshaphat. "You've just been in bed all the time." "I'm not telling any stories," said his brother stoutly. "I tell you, I have been to visit the old man in the moon." But Jehoshaphat wouldn't believe him. "That's a whopper," said he. Marmaduke turned to his friend the toyman. "I have been there, haven't I?" "Where?" asked the toyman. "To see the old man in the moon." "Of course you have," his good old chum replied, "and a heap of wonderful things you saw." The toyman never laughed at the wonderful things they had done, nor at the marvelous things they had seen. No, never. For he understood little children. Now Jehoshaphat had to believe him. He asked lots of questions while Hezekiah listened, her eyes growing as round as big peppermint drops. So Marmaduke showed them the little red and blue sleigh and told them all about the driver, Jack Frost, the little driver, Jack Frost. And he didn't forget about old black-eyed Susan's great jump, nor the gold pennies either. Jehoshaphat felt just a little jealous. Perhaps that is why he was naughty that day. And this is how it happened. It was in the afternoon. Jehoshaphat was coming home from the schoolhouse, which was up the road about a mile, a long way from the White House with the green blinds where the 3 happy children lived. With him walked 4 of his friends, Sophie Soapstone and Sammy Soapstone, who lived on the farm by the old canal, Lizzie Frizzletree, who lived on the turnpike, and Fatty Ham, who lived by the river road. Sammy Soapstone had blue eyes and tow hair which stood up straight on his head. It was as stiff as the curry comb with which the toyman brushed the horses. Sophie Soapstone had blue eyes too, and 2 neat little pigtails down her back. But Lizzie Frizzletree had black eyes and hair that stuck out in all directions. She had more safety pins on her dress than a neat little girl should ever have, and her stockings were forever coming down. Fatty Ham was so round and so plump that he looked as if he had pillows under his clothes, and though he was only 12, he had 2 chins. Every once in a while he would eat so much that a button would pop off. He was eating apples now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 he ate. He did not offer one to his friends, not even the core. Another apple he took. That made 6. Pop went a button, and splash, it landed in a puddle of brown water. For 3 days it had rained, washing the white snow away. The ruts in the road were full of these puddles, nice and brown and inviting. Sammy's eyes and Jehoshaphat's eyes followed the button as it landed in the water, making little rings which grew larger all the time. "Let's slosh," said Sammy. "Let's," cried Lizzie Frizzletree. "It's lots of fun sloshin'." Into a big puddle marched Sammy Soapstone, and after him marched Lizzie and Sophie, and at the end of the procession waddled Fatty. Slop, slosh, slop, slosh. They went through puddle after puddle. Glorious fun it was. Showers of spray flew all over the road. But Jehoshaphat walked on ahead in the middle of the road. Hadn't his mother told him particularly not to get his feet wet? "Come on in, it's fine," they all shouted at Jehoshaphat. "Oh, come on," Sammy Soapstone replied, and Fatty called, "'Fraid cat." At that, Jehoshaphat turned around. He just couldn't stand being called 'fraid cat. So, slosh, slosh, into the biggest brown puddle he could find he went. Slosh, slop, slop, slosh. Over his rubber tops went the water. Fine and cool it felt. Splash went the water over the road, and he kicked it over Fatty till the round fat legs were drenched too. Then all the boys bent over the puddle and scooped up great handfuls of water and threw them over each other. It was a great battle, and when it was finished and they were soaked to the skin, they splashed up the road shouting and singing. I guess they went into every last puddle between the schoolhouse and the white house with the green blinds by the side of the road. They had reached it now. All of a sudden, Jehoshaphat felt very funny near the pit of his stomach. Something was sure to happen now. In front of the house marched Mr. Stuck-Up, the turkey. His chest was stuck out, and his tail feathers were spread out too, like a great big fan. He was having a lovely parade all by himself. Rubber, 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 he gobbled. Jehoshaphat looked down at his feet. He felt guilty. But he thought it was very mean of Mr. Stuck-Up to call attention to his wet rubbers that way. Keep quiet, Jehoshaphat shouted. You don't need to tell on me. Rubber, 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 gobbled Mr. Stuck-Up just the same. Jehoshaphat kicked at him with his wet feet and tried to grab the fat red nose that hung down over the turkey's beak. At that, old Mr. Stuck-Up's feathers ruffled in anger, and he hurried off, still gobbling rubber, 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 as loud as he could. Around the house sneaked Jehoshaphat, trying hard not to be seen. Halfway to the back door, who should he meet but a procession of the foolish white geese. By this time, Jehoshaphat was not only wet clear through, he was angry clear through too, so he kicked at them. They stretched out their long white necks and called, hiss, hiss, hiss. They might be very foolish, these white geese, but they were sensible enough to know that Jehoshaphat ought to have been ashamed of himself that afternoon. To make matters worse, the sun was shining now. He sparkled so brightly on the gold rooster on top of the barn that Father Wyandotte flapped his wings and cried to all the world, Look, 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 look! You're gonna get it, hurroo! And all the white Wyandottes took up the cry, Cut, 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 cut! You'll get it! Jehoshaphat wished he were as small as Hoppo my thumb, so that he could creep through the keyhole and never be seen at all. But he had one friend left, little Wienerwurst, who frisked up to him just then, wagging his tail. He didn't scold Jehoshaphat at all, partly because he was so often up to mischief himself. And then little Wienerwurst always stuck by his friends anyway. For a while, nothing more happened, and Jehoshaphat tiptoed in at the back door. Mother was nowhere to be seen, so over the floor he sneaked. At every step, the water oozed out and slop, splosh, slop, splosh, still went the shoes. But he reached his room safely. Then quickly he rummaged in the drawers of the bureau. Quiet as a mouse, he took off his wet clothes and put them in the darkest corner of the big closet. Quiet as a mouse, he drew on clean, dry ones. But someone was calling, Jehoshaphat! Jehoshaphat! No answer was made. Jehoshaphat! Jehoshaphat! No longer could he hide, so, making his face look as bold and as innocent as possible, he walked into the dining room. But somehow, though he tried to look innocent, I guess he really looked guilty. Jehoshaphat Green, what have you been doing? Asked Mother. Her eyes were almost always kind, but they were a little stern just then. Jehoshaphat tried another look on his face, for you can try different looks on your face just as you try different hats on your head. This time he tried the one that folks call unconcerned, a look as if he had no troubles at all, as if he had nothing to hide. Just plain, he answered his mother. Then his mother asked a very strange question. Where's the party? Jehoshaphat was surprised. Party sounded fine. What party, Mother? He asked. I don't know, his mother replied. I just thought you were dressed up for one. And he looked down at his clean suit and his Sunday best shoes, and from out the corner of his eye he saw wet places on the floor and muddy tracks about as big as his feet. No answer now had Jehoshaphat. He guessed he would go into the parlor. So he sat down at the marble-topped table and looked at the picture book which Uncle Roger had given him. It was full of great white ships sailing the blue sea. For a moment, he almost forgot all his troubles. So interested was he in looking at those great ships and their sails and all the wonderful fish. Then suddenly he remembered. He looked out through the door into the dining room. Mother wasn't saying anything. She was just busy, that's all. But had she forgotten? Somehow, Jehoshaphat did not like the sad look on her face. He went and shut the door. He thought he would feel more comfortable if he couldn't see Mother's eyes. Then he sat down to look at the picture book again, but he felt more miserable than ever. Bang! He shut the book too. It was very strange. The things that usually made him so happy weren't any fun at all then. Then he looked up at the mantel. Above it hung a great picture. There was a man in a cocked hat. He had on a fine uniform, and he rode a tall white horse. Jehoshaphat knew very well who that was. It would be his birthday tomorrow, George Washington's birthday. The teacher had told them all about it that afternoon. She had told them a story, too, about a hatchet and a cherry tree, and a lie. The man on the horse looked down from the picture. The eyes were very stern. A lie. Yes, that's just what he had told to Mother. He had told a lie and acted a lie. Though there was no one else in the room but the great man in the big picture, Jehoshaphat's cheeks grew very red. A lump came into his throat. Now he never could be president, nor have a sword, and ride a big white horse, and call forward march to the whole army. No, never. To the window he went and pressed his nose against the pane. The clouds were gray. It all seemed very dark and not at all cheerful, as the world ought to be. Once more he looked up at the picture. And as he looked at the eyes of the man in the picture, they told him to do something. He decided to do it. And as soon as he decided, he felt better. Not all better, but better. And out into the dining room he marched. He had to close his fist tight, for it is very hard sometimes to tell people you've done wrong to them, especially if they are people you love. Mother, he said, not very loud. She looked up. Yes? Mother, He stopped. Mother looked up. She saw his lip tremble a little and wanted to take him in her arms, but she didn't just then. He must tell what he had to tell first. Mother, I told a lie. I got my feet wet SLOSHIN, and I said I was playing when I changed my clothes. And I'm sorry, and I'll never do it again. Then Mother did take him in her arms, and she kissed him and hugged him too. Well, I love my little boy all the more for this. It was very wrong to disobey, worse still to tell a lie. But it was hard to tell me your own self about it, and you were brave. So she kissed him, and her eyes weren't sad anymore. End of chapter.